Continuing our discussion on macroeconomics and Indian economy. We earlier talked about how they generally say that the government's business is not business. It's not the business of the government to do business. It's the job of the private sector. And thinking more about it, I think it's not actually a modern idea. It's an ancient old idea. It's not a new idea. Because if you think about it, in the olden days, you had these warlords, tribal leaders, military leaders of clans, kings, rulers, and all that. And they became leaders either because they were already powerful through inheritance, or they had physical strength and stuff like that, or personality and could defeat people in hand to hand combat. So they had, maybe some of them had their own private property and they were strong. And their job was to settle disputes, internal disputes, and fight with other clans and other tribes and protect. So their job was basically military and law and order. And so the economic part was never their domain. It was left to the individuals. So individuals would till their farms and do trade and all that. So tradespeople would trade, farmers would do farming. Maybe the chieftain himself would have a large farm or something like that. So kings also got taxes, had armies, maintained law and order, waged wars, defended. So these chieftains, maybe their jobs were to fight with other clans, defend against other clans, settle internal disputes, and manage their own private property or farms, or look after their own trade, individual trade. So trade and economics were kind of, that is the way that it was already always done by private individuals and private traders. It was never a central subject. It was never the subject of the ruler. Even kings also collected taxes, waged wars, defended against wars, held court and gave judgments in private disputes and matters of that sort. So they never got into economics. They had their own fortune bequeathed by their forefathers, or because of taxation, or because of family connections and social connections. And so you already had rich people, ruling classes, who had inherited from their forefathers. So they were already rich, or they had connections with the king, and they had family ties and marriage ties and whatnot and social ties. So trade and economy were left to individuals. Tradespeople did trade, farmers did agriculture. The king himself did not get involved in the national economy or the economy of his kingdom. So I think that is the legacy. And Keynes wasn't there, so there was no macroeconomics then. So after Keynes, macroeconomics came, and after this Russian and Soviet and Chinese revolutions, you had this idea of state or the government playing a major role in economy. So that, I think, is a modern idea rather than an old idea. So it needs some more consideration at least. So I was just trying to look at it in historical sense, that why has always there been this thing that, look, get the government out of it, because that is the way people have been doing it for centuries, from time immemorial. So this is a new idea, so it hasn't really caught on, I would say. And it didn't do well in the case of Soviet Union, so that was also a setback. So that is one of the things that I found interesting, because I was wondering how to explain this. So state's role in economy, the government's role in economy is not the norm. That is rather a deviation, and the norm is, let everybody figure out. It's private individuals doing private transactions and markets and stuff like that. So it's not a modern idea, the market thing. It's an ancient idea. So like all ancient ideas, it doesn't have to be a permanent idea. It might need rethinking and tweaking. Let's talk about something that is again interesting: automation. As I said, In manufacturing, you have a lot of automation. So automation is reducing jobs because of robots and now artificial intelligence and mechanized machinery and automation doing the job and reducing the number of jobs. So I think earlier it was thought that automation would take away the drudgery from people's lives. The boring, repetitive stuff would be done by machines and the people would be freed to do better things. But what if there are no better things for the people to do? You have been laid off because of a machine and you have got nothing better to do. So what happens then? The other argument that has always been presented, and we always swallowed that argument also, is that automation would displace labor. So some jobs would be lost, but many more would be created. Because of automation, some jobs would be lost because machines would take over in some areas and humans would not be needed so much. And but then because of automation itself, new industries would come up. So automation would give rise to new needs, new demands, and those new needs, new demands, new industries would in turn create new jobs and more jobs. So you would have a net probably job loss because of automation, but job gain because of newer industries. So and you would get the job gain would be higher than the job loss. Now we kind of have been thinking going ahead with it. But I don't think if anybody has seriously done a very serious large scale study to find out if this has actually happened, that so many jobs were lost and against it so many were created. So one would like to do that. And secondly, let's not go too macro here, let's go a bit more granular. Let's say, I mean, for an economist it might not make a difference. Let's say 50 welders lose their jobs. A welder who, these guys are doing welding all their lives, let's say in their mid 40s or late 30s or whatever, and picked up welding from a trade school or ITI, something like that, and have been working in welding all their lives, 20-25 years of experience. Now suddenly, because of some new factories, new industries, new automation, all that, these welders lose their jobs. So let's say 50 welders go out, they don't have any welding work and they lose their jobs, but 100 software engineer jobs are available. So I mean, you get a surplus of 50. But then what happens to these 50 welders? Are those 50 welders going to be the 50 out of those 100 software engineers? How many of those welders are going to become software engineers? Not even one, I would say. They do talk of reskilling and all that, but this is ridiculous. I mean, a guy who's probably a trade school pass ITI guy with 20 years of experience doing welding, and this is not about new and improved welding techniques, this is about coding, software, Python and Java. Now you think this welder is somehow going to learn to code and like a computer engineer and become a software developer? Not going to happen. So you gave 100 jobs to 100 young software guys, but these 50 welders have been laid off. You see the economic gain of 50 jobs, because 50 were lost and 100 were gained. But then what about these 50 individuals? What to do with them? They are out on their hindquarters. What are they going to do? How are they going to survive? What kind of reskilling would you give them to make them software engineers? Because the demand is for software engineers, let us say. So this kind of displacement, broadly speaking, macro level, it's good. But what about these individuals? How will they live? How will they survive? Is there social security? In US, they have some social security, which many Americans don't like. But at least they survive because of social security when they don't have jobs. In India, there is no social security. So what would these welders do? Nobody needs to bother about them. They can die, because that is the law of the jungle, capitalism, survival of the fittest and adaptation and blah, 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 blah. That is ridiculous, laughable and inhumane, right? So let's think about that rather than saying, oh, in total we got 100 jobs and 50 were lost. So that happens, part of life. If you are a welder, you would have a different take on the situation. If you're a software engineer, you would have a different take on the situation. So how are you going to look after these welders then? Because they are not going to become software engineers. It is highly next to impossible. Maybe one out of 500 welders might become a software developer, because you don't have the education for it, you don't have the skill set, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have anything, and all your life, I mean, how it, an engineer can't become a doctor, and a doctor can't become an engineer overnight. You spent your life doing medicine, you have spent your life doing engineering, and now you can change careers, and something drastically different can't be done. So you say this reskilling, but how are you going to reskill a plumber or a welder to become a software engineer? And you are happy that software jobs are created, but then what about these human beings, individual human beings, rather than those big job numbers of 100 added and 50 lost, so gain of 50? But those 50 human beings who lost their jobs, what are you going to do about it? Don't they deserve any consideration? They are equal, whether a software engineer, a plumber, I mean, all Indians are your citizens, right? Whether he is a homeless guy, sick, dirty, uneducated, unemployed, sleeping on the street, or begging, he is still an Indian. And Mukesh Ambani is also an Indian, and both get one vote. So you have to worry about that poor fellow there also. So you can't say, oh, that's tough luck, What can we do? So you have to worry about the people who lose their jobs also, and through no fault of their own, right? Shouldn't you be thinking about it? Isn't it what civilized people would do? Capitalism is rule of the jungle, survival of the fittest. But I mean, some people, when you put those strong people against the weak people, the weak would never survive. Capitalism is talking about survival of the fittest and adapt or perish, but it's basically law of the jungle. The strong destroy the weak, and that is not civilized behavior, that is law of the jungle. So we have to be better than that. We can't talk about the law of the jungle. And when in a human context you put strong people against weak people, the strong people would win and the weak people would perish. Because it was not that the weak people were bad or something like that. They never had a chance. The way they grew up, whether they were they grew up poor, they had no chance of an education, no proper upbringing, no hygiene, maybe no food, no nourishment and all that. And suddenly you throw them in competition with highly educated, competent, smart people. How are they going to survive? So should they die? Is that what we want? Should they be destroyed? We don't mind that. Is that civilization? And we don't mind the winners becoming heroes and so-called captains of industry and empire builders. But there are only a few heroes. Most people are average, the bell curve, the normal distribution. So we are worried the heroes will take care of themselves. The captains of industry and empire builders are immensely talented, exceptional individuals, a bunch of them, and they will figure out. But out of a population of 140 crores plus, we will have a few individuals like that. Most are going to be average Joes, and we have to worry about those average Joes and the weaker people, right? And we are not saying that the average Joe should fly a private Learjet or fly a helicopter or live in a multi-storied skyscraper building and have a limousine. But we must look after him so that his basic needs are met. He gets basically roti, kapda, makan, food, clothing, a roof over his head, doesn't have to sleep on the streets or out in the open, and healthcare, which is not expensive, education, which is not too expensive, he should have a chance to educate himself, get proper healthcare, be able to survive by getting food and clothing. That's it. And then he will go if he deserves, if he has capabilities to rise. But his basic needs, basic human decency and dignity, we have to give him that, right? And if you can't give him jobs, either give him a job, or then provide those things. Give him social security, give him money, give him stuff. Either you don't want to give freebies, you don't like that. So don't give freebies, but give him work then. But you are unable to give him work, and then you don't like freebies. You want them to die, and what is their fault? They should die just because they were born? Is that what civilization is all about? I don't like that kind of civilization. Then we are not civilized at all. That kind of capitalism is law of jungle. And I don't like that kind of capitalism. There is some humanity, right? Some sensible. You have to talk about human dignity. Everybody who is born in India is an Indian citizen, and all are equal, and all deserve a chance, right? And some will do better. We don't mind that. We don't grudge them that. They can have billions and millions, doesn't really matter. But the other guy should be allowed to live a decent life. We are not saying everybody should be living like kings. No. So automation has got this issue that we have to think about. And the similarly, we talk about the gig economy. Fine. But let us say a BE computer science guy who has been laid off now has to deliver food at night on a motorcycle, Swiggy, Zomato sort of stuff. Or maybe a businessman or an employee or a well paid employee lost his job and has a small car and has to drive around and join as a taxi driver in one of those taxi aggregating services like Uber or whatever. Is that something fantastic? A software engineer has to deliver food. Is that why he studied software engineering? Was that his ambition? And you think the gig economy is great? The guy who has to drive an auto rickshaw or a taxi, who maybe has an ME or an MTech or a PhD or something or the other, is that why he studied to become a taxi driver? Would he have studied if he had to become a taxi driver? So all this gig economy is just okay. It helps in taking care of the livelihood part, but is it an ideal situation? We have to think about these things, right? We talk of infrastructure, a stupid idea, this fascination with infrastructure. And whenever people talk of development, they generally talk about this physical things that they see, bridges and flyovers and dams and high-rise buildings and basically construction, new construction. What if there is a fantastically built library but no books? What if there is a library with books but no readers? So we have to look at other aspects of development, whether lives of human beings have improved or not. Their standard of living has improved, poverty has gone down, literacy has gone up, they have a decent life, they can look forward to a better future, they have some basic dignity, their basic needs are being met, the standards of life living are improving. Or we are just talking about these fancy fast trains and fast transportation and all that, which doesn't really, how much does it help and whom does it help? Trains which are getting faster and faster and transportation is faster and all that, who is going to use it? What is the overall impact? And how does it help the people who are basically in a mess because of their circumstances, environment, genetics, or the conditions they were born into, their surroundings, their upbringing, lack of education, poverty? They at least need a chance to get out of it. Give them the tools so they can survive. And if you can't give them the tools like education, or if you can't give them work or find work for them, then you have to give freebies. What's wrong with it? Should they die on the streets? So give them work or give them money or stuff, if not money, so that they can survive. Because they are your citizens. They were born in this country and you have to look after them. Each one gets a vote. And we are not saying that this guy has got a limousine, so everybody should get a limousine. No, but let this guy at least be able to live, survive. Some basic decency, some basic human life. We must give some dignity, have some dignity for basic human life. Respect for that. Otherwise, they will never be able to compete because they don't have the starting advantages that the others had. Never were born in a good family, no good parents. Poverty was there, food was not proper, not brought up well, brought up in a slum, bad habits all around. So, and rich people like to think that these guys deserve, because they, basically they are like lazy and they just get drunk and all that. Maybe some of them are like that, but not all, firstly. So that's not a fair assumption to say. And even these guys, or then it becomes about religion, past life, they must have done some sins. And even these poor fellows, unfortunately, think like that. They don't think the government has any role to play or the employer has any role to play. They think it is all about their fate and their destiny and their past karma. Maybe it is God's will or they did some bad things in the past. So they don't even think the government has any role to play. Even the poor guys don't even believe. That's the really funny part. They don't think the government has any role to play or the rich guy has any role to play. They think it is their lot that they are suffering because of their past karma or past life sins committed in the past life or God's will or fate or destiny or whatever. This is a bit ridiculous. Then we talk of this physical development and infrastructure, as I said. So whom does it benefit? And what is the point of making those buildings? And maybe it does employ, as I said, I don't know that it is going to have this multiplier effect and all that. I don't really, I'm not sure about that. And making a house or making a building and spending the money that you have spent. So it is capital versus revenue, and we have this fascination with capital and productive versus non-productive. Now, why do you need productive? The government doesn't even need to make money, as we said earlier. It has as much money as it wants. So what is this business about having productive assets? And capital is revenue or more focus on capital rather than revenue expenditure. Let us say there is a building, so that's a physical asset, so to speak. And then if you could take that amount, which is a capital expenditure, one-time expenditure, and take that amount and maybe you are able to support 1,000 people for their entire life by giving them jobs, then I don't think this is better than that. So I don't like this fascination with capital projects. Revenue is also important. Government giving salaries to people is important. Whether it is wasteful or not, I don't know. It is supporting those individuals to live. That is, there is no waste in that. You have to allow people to survive. You have to either there should be enough work generated naturally, or you have to generate that work, or just give it to them. Give them money or give them stuff, or put them on social security, or find work for them. But they must be given a chance to survive. So these fancy capital projects, sometimes, Japan has had this experience. Japan is a very interesting country where there is no inflation despite massive government expenditure. Firstly, that's funny. And secondly, they did a lot of this civic truck manufacturing stuff. And they have these famous roads that lead to nowhere. They built roads all over the place, but nobody uses those roads. So a lot of concrete and construction is there, but it didn't really help the economy that much or the people that much. So that is a crazy experiment in infrastructure, something similar to infrastructure development. And I have seen that when there is demand and when there is need, people have used it and done transactions and done business without there being any infrastructure. I have seen businesses working in areas with very poor connectivity just because it made business sense, and they have done business without notwithstanding this poor connectivity. I have seen colleges where the roads are bad, but still people come and study, and there are teachers and professors. Think about the ancient times. You had postcards and no mobile phones and no maybe telephone lines, and people used to do planes. But Surat was a big port, and Indians were doing a lot of exports, spices and sadis all across the world. Where was the infrastructure then? We had bullock carts and stuff like that, but people still found a way to transact and trade. For centuries, people have been doing trade and agriculture and business and all that. So infrastructure has made it a bit easier, a bit better, a bit smoother. But infrastructure doesn't really change the equation fundamentally. So everything is infrastructure. Without infrastructure, we can't do anything is bullshit. It is about demand. Infrastructure creation also generates some demand, but as I said, that maybe circulates, that money circulates in only those select circles of construction kind of people and that sector and people associated with that sector. So without infrastructure also you can do business. You have been doing business. You don't need fancy infrastructure to transact. People have walked, people have swum, people have gone on ships and done business and studied and all that. Infrastructure makes things a bit better, but it is not that without that you can't exist. So too much focus on infrastructure is also a stupid priority, and there is a limited out gain from to be had from that. So this is a fancy, this is again a stupid idea, and people keep talking about it. I don't know why, but it doesn't make logical sense to me. It makes it a bit easier, faster, and all that. But people have a lot of time. So if you save half an hour in travel, that doesn't mean that they are going to be much more productive and do wonders in half an hour or 1 hour or something. So faster planes and faster trains and faster all that doesn't really help much. You have to worry about what to do with that time, and you have to how to kill that time. That's a problem sometimes. So automation was supposed to do labor saving and drudgery, but then people were freed and they had nothing better to do. So they didn't get a chance to do better creative stuff. So even saving time has diminishing returns. So I've talked about gig economy. Japan did that, and in some cases, I think these are pork barrel projects. What is known as pork barrel project, basically a chance to get do bribery and kickbacks. You have a massive infrastructure project, millions and billions of rupees and dollars. So maybe 1 to 3% of it is, even if 1 to 3% of it is cut back and bribes and commissions, then think of the amount of money that those guys who are in charge can make. So sometimes these things are done firstly because they are visible. People see, oh, there was a building where there was none. So physical development instead of intangible development. Development can be intangible also. And people have this edifice complex. We want to see structures. So it's easier to say there is development, easier to show. And people think it is new and swanky and all that. And maybe people make money because of this, some percentage cuts and bribes and kickbacks. Maybe that is why these projects are so popular. So I'm a bit skeptical about that. So I've talked about infrastructure, automation, gig economy, problem or whatever the thing about the freebies and all that. And so what next? We'll continue talking about it. Thank you.